Welcome to Fasken's 16th Annual Global Mining Group Seminar Series. My name is Virginia Schweitzer, and I'm part of the Fasken Global Mining Group and a partner in Fasken's Ottawa office. Today's session, Ole, more exciting than the World Cup, Fasken's annual LatAm Mining Roundup, is the 10th in our series of 12 seminars this year. For those watching online, there is a link to our seminar series beside the video window, and for those in the room, we have information at our registration desk. As you view the info slides on the screen, I'd like to provide a land acknowledgement. At Fasken, we have embarked on a journey of reconciliation, guided by our Reconciliation Action Plan. As part of this journey, we believe it is important to acknowledge the land and the people who have called this land home since time immemorial. Today, in Toronto, we are gathered on the territory that has been the home of many nations, including the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Chippewa, and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nations. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Chippewa. We appreciate living and working here and recognize the importance of working to advance reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here and across Canada. I would now like to introduce Myroslav Chwaluk, who is a partner at Fasken in our Toronto office. Mo?
Okay, welcome everyone to our 16th annual Latin American Mining Update, which I decided to entitle More Exciting Than the World Cup, because of course Canada, Mexico, and some other country are going to play host to a number of countries this June and July for the World Cup. And it's been, frankly, a crazy year for geopolitics and the metals and mining industry. And I think some of that tension even creeps into sports, so I think it's a relevant theme for us. Anyway, I hope everyone is glad that they chose to come to Toronto in March and not Mexico or that other country to watch the World Cup. But at least playing Bad Bunny here won't get you scolded by our Prime Minister. But I also wanted to reference the World Cup because this panel is one of our best attended seminars every year due to the stars that we attract here from the various jurisdictions and the legal talent and knowledge that we bring here. So many of you who have attended this event in the past will be familiar with our guests, but there's some new faces, so I'd like to introduce and welcome our panelists. So our first presenter today is going to be John Price, Managing Director of America's Market Intelligence, a business intelligence and research and strategic consultancy with unparalleled reach and experience in Latin America, and who's an expert on above the ground risks in multiple countries with deep and comprehensive insights that we're glad to have along at multiple panels. Thanks, John. Mexico makes a return to our panel this year. We have Edmond Grieger here from von Wobeser y Sierra. He's a partner in Mexico City, leading energy and natural resources practice and environmental practices with many years of experience in project development, environmental and regulatory law. Edmond graciously welcomed Fasken and myself personally in Mexico City on a beautiful, warm patio overlooking volcanoes in the distance. So I'm very happy to return the favor here in Toronto for you, Edmond. From Ecuador, we have María Isabel Aillón, a partner at Perez-Bustamante in Ponce, practicing natural resource law and dispute resolution, who is well known as a speaker and commentator at conferences and panels already. Thank you so much, María Isabel. We have a new guest this year, Pablo Ordonez from Bolivia, a partner at PPO Indacochea, leading the firm's Chambers-ranked tax law team, advising on inbound investments into Bolivia and outbounds and a lot of tax structuring. And Fasken has had the pleasure of working with, there you are, Pablo, has had the pleasure of working with Pablo a number of times in 25 and 26 on a mutual client investing into Bolivia. So I'm really excited to hear everything that your views on the country. Making a return to our panel is Claudio Ferrero from Estudio Rodrigo in Peru, who practices mining law and M&A there. Welcome back, Claudio. I know that you're moderating a panel on the LatAm Business Conference in Cambridge in the US after PDAC, so I wish you luck, and I hope your panelists are as distinguished and enthusiastic as ours are today, and I hope they do not play Bad Bunny for you as intro music there. From Chile, we of course have Carlos Perez-Cotapos, the managing partner at Cariola, who's a widely recognized corporate and commercial practice focused on mining and environmental law, and a veteran of our panel in the largest and most developed mining jurisdiction represented here today. Thanks, Carlos. From Argentina, we have Saúl Feilbogen from Vitale Manoff and Feilbogen, who practices in corporate rights and capital markets. And it's impossible not to think about the next frontier of Latin American mining project development without Argentina being top of mind. So thanks again, Saúl. And our last speaker who corrected me, she is not a veteran, she just acts like a veteran, is Roberta Demange from Pinheiro Neto Advogados in Brazil, Sao Paulo, practicing transactional work in mining infrastructure. And I'm, as Virginia introduced, I'm a partner here in Fasken, practicing corporate finance and securities laws with focus on mining transactions. There is one piece of housekeeping before we move into the session, is that we want this to be a candid discussion and, talk about real things and be open with each other, which makes this an interesting session, but it means that we might express things that we want to clarify our individual views and not the views of any firm represented here today. And also, we will have a Q&A with time permitting, including for online participants, for those of you who are participating online. So please save any audience questions for the end. And there's be a chance to network after the session with our panelists. So I was looking at our notes from last year's session, and our introduction made reference to a geopolitically charged world, a volatile White House, a definitive U.S. anti-China economic stance, particularly with respect to access to critical minerals, Canadian politics moving to the right, improving outlooks for metals, and difficult financial situations in Latin American countries. So some of that has proven itself very true multiple times over the last year, and some of it has changed dramatically. So for example, for Canadians, we didn't elect a right-wing government, but a center-left government again. And we've experienced more deterioration in our trade relationships with the US and somehow warming trade relationships with China. We have competing critical minerals investments programs with the United States. And we have headlines that include political leaders being kidnapped and jailed and tropical islands being blockaded and whatever else is happening in the Middle East that we can't even keep up with over the last couple of days. And so one thing that's topical is we don't even have to think about this in a lot of our jurisdictions, but there's a shortage of potentially air defense missiles that's going to be needing a lot of critical minerals to replenish those supplies. So, these are topics that we're facing every day that we didn't even expect. So our goal today is to see how our represented jurisdictions are facing these questions on a country by country basis. So we know what's working, what's not, and what to expect. So a great and traditional way to kick off this discussion is to provide a regional overview on trends and issues in Latin America. And so for that, I'll ask John, as I said, Managing Director of America's Market Intelligence, to kick off, and then we'll move into our country by country discussion. So John, lead the way.
Thank you, Mo. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back. I'm going to play the sentimental card for just a moment. It was about 8.5 years ago when I was sitting down with a miner in a cafe in the middle of the summer, and Paul Fornazzari walked in, and the gentleman knew him and drew him over, and my firm had just published a report called Managing Mining Risk in Latin America. That was 8 years ago. Paul read it, called me 20 minutes later and said, "We've got to get you on next year's panel." And that's what began a very fruitful collaboration, and I'm very appreciative of Fasken, to Michael Barassa, who Paul introduced me to, and subsequently to Mo for including me on this panel as the only non-lawyer. And I'm proud to say that just very recently, in the last few weeks, we updated this report, and I'm here with my colleague Sebastian Perez. We have a few copies for those of you who are interested. And I mention this report because what we try to do is simplify and explain risk to mining investors, which is not an easy topic to simplify, into 7 different areas. And over the years, our discussions have shifted. And obviously, even in any one given year, as you'll hear from our colleagues, each country has a different set of challenges and a different set of opportunities. And you cannot make blanket statements about a region as diverse politically, economically, as diverse as it is in terms of its resources and where they are and who controls them. But let me walk you through 4 risks that we see very much prevalent, top of mind, not in every jurisdiction, but certainly in several of them. And the first is permitting delays. We have seen the permitting environment across Latin America grow more and more complex. The process of dealing with new issues and adding permits and adding regulations to them has resulted in layers after layers without necessarily a culling or a streamlining or a simplification process. So in a country like Peru, where 20 years ago, I think it was something like 20 permits, now it's well over 100. And so you see, talk to miners in Colombia, and they'll tell you the issue's not local, it's Bogota, and it's certain regulators in Bogota. So this is a very real issue in a lot of jurisdictions. Obviously, nobody's better equipped to help you with that than the people here on the panel, but it is a challenge that can frustrate the timelines of your projects. Another is, of course, social license, and I think we're very familiar with, and we've become very familiar, and I would say that miners across the world have become much more adept at dealing with community opposition and gaining social license at the community level. I remember 20 years ago, miners, often the government relations people, were very finely dressed, very finely spoken, people who knew how to rub shoulders with ministers of mining. And then they would show up to the mine site in their auto blindado with the minister in suits. And as soon as they stepped out of the car with that optic, they lost the community. And miners began to realize that they need to court the community as aggressively and as carefully as they do any minister of mining. And what we've seen in recent years, as mining has become adopted by, I would say, non-traditional jurisdictions, Panama, Dominican Republic, and others, what you see is these are countries where there's great enthusiasm at the national level, but not necessarily across the voter base of the whole country. We mustn't forget that Latin America is the most urbanized region in the world, and where 80% of its voters live in cities, and they will never see a mine in their entire life, which means that what they know about mining is what people tell them. And there are far more voices in any jurisdiction telling them bad things about mining than there are telling them good things about mining. And this becomes an issue when your political class is not properly schooled on the benefits of mining. And if you're a politician in Bogota, you're faced with the fact that most Colombians think that gold mining is illegal and launders money and causes environmental damage. So as a politician, you're afraid to endorse mining. So for miners, it's not just about winning the hearts and minds of the community, it's about working with other miners to win the hearts and minds of the nation. Because not all nations are mining nations, like a Peru or a Chile or a Suriname or a Guyana, where 1 in 4 people go off into the bush to do their own mining. And so you have a whole country in support of mining. So you don't, depending on your jurisdiction, you also have to think about your urban voters and what they think about mining. Next is security risk. We have to contend with the fact that organized crime in Latin America has grown more sophisticated. Now, generally, miners face 2 forms of security risk. One is that if this organized crime is as prevalent and sophisticated as it is in certain parts of Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, then they're going to see you as potential business. And if you operate a mine in one of 8 states in Mexico, you will find that your vendors, the people who provide the busing service, the people who provide the catering service, the people who provide the specialized cargo transport, suddenly the prices go up 25 to 30% because organized crime took over those businesses, and that's how they're taxing you. So that's what I call opportunistic security risk. They see you as an opportunity. The other risk is when they see you as a threat. So I remember looking at a mine in southern Honduras where there was plenty of community support, the national government supported, but it happened to be a transport corridor for drugs moving northward. So the Nicaraguan military and the Honduran military were in cahoots moving drugs across the border. And this mine would have brought lights, roads, policing, and attention to an area of the country that they didn't want any attention brought to. So they did their best to threaten the community to oppose the mine. So you have to understand where your mine sits and where you may be a threat to ongoing businesses whether it's you're competing for the labor with organized crime or you're getting in the way of their other businesses. And the last but not least, particularly in a world of unbelievably high gold, silver, copper prices, are the fiscal realities of many of our countries. COVID was devastating to Latin America economically more than anything else. Why? Because Latin America depends upon VAT taxes for more than 50% of its tax income. And when the service economy came to a crashing halt during the quarantines of upwards of a year in some of these countries, then they collected no service industry taxes. And so every country in Latin America lost footing in terms of their standing, their bond standing, their sovereign risk standing, which means that their cost of borrowing went up just as interest rates are going up. So almost every country in Latin America, some much more than others, but almost every country faces a fiscal challenge of one degree or another. And they face a reality where they cannot raise VAT taxes anymore. They're some of the highest in the world, and they can't raise them. And they don't have the government tax authority reach to effectively collect income taxes the way, say, the Americans do. And so what does that mean? That means they focus on resources, particularly when resource prices are high. So any of you who are, you have to think about how is, and it doesn't matter if they're right wing or left wing. If they need money, they will come after you. So don't take any solace in the fact that a right-wing government is being elected or will be elected in your jurisdiction. If you're in fiscal trouble, if your country's in fiscal trouble, you may be the target of the next tax raise. So those are some of the risks that we're seeing. Be interesting to see how they resonate or not as we go through each jurisdiction. But thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you, John. That's just perfect framing. So with Mexico as Canada's closest neighbor of these jurisdictions, we're going to kick off our country-by-country overview with Edmond. And when I was visiting recently, the question of Canada-Mexico trade was constantly top of mind. And there was a recent article in the Globe that said, we often hear of Mexico as Canada's third largest trading partner, but it only accounts for 1.1% of our exports and 3.6% of our two-way trade. And that's just crazy to me, given how close neighbors we are. And the article was titled, Canada Should Bet Bigger on Mexico. And I really believe that, especially in light of what has turned into effectively a hostile administration towards Canada. So Edmond, take us through it. What should investors and their advisors be thinking about in Mexico's mining industry in 2026 and beyond?
Well, thank you very much, Mo. Thank you, John, for all the details. I think I will check the box in many of those for Mexico. Thank you, Michael, for the invitation, Fasken for having us here. And, well, I just want to say the title is Ole more exciting than the World Cup. I would say Mexico is like in overtime, playing with full intensity, and we're still waiting for a final decision of the referee, that in our case is the Supreme Court of Justice. So why am I saying this? As many of you may know, in Mexico we had a very significant mining reform in 2023, where most of the regulatory framework was reshaped. Several limitations, additional requirements were put in place. So this is an important reform that is still pending for resolution, final resolution by our Supreme Court. There's have been a lot of challenges, constitutional actions, amparo claims brought by companies, investors, by the same congressmen that were in the other parties, and they were against the process, the fast track process that enacted that bill. So that's where we stand. Here there are several important issues that I would like to highlight with regards to this reform. For example, with regards to concession titles, we had before concession titles that were granted for a term of 50 years plus 50 years. With this reform, it was reduced to 30 years plus 25 years. So obviously the shortening of the term will impact as well the long-term planning, financing of projects. Another important issue that came along with this reform was related to new environmental requirements and restrictions. With regards to restrictions, before, we used to allow mining projects to be developed in natural areas With this new reform, there's a general prohibition. There's no permits allowed or being granted for new projects in natural reserved areas. There's a little bit of a detail here. Before, you could develop these projects in the natural areas, but not in the nucleus area, in the surrounding areas and with the corresponding permits. Now it's all prohibited. So that's as well an important restriction. And we have new obligations regarding environmental compliance, reporting for the closure of the mine, for the remediation as well. So we have all this additional informing permits related to environmental, something that was John mentioning as well. And one additional important issue that I would mention is water legal framework. Within the mining reform, we had as well an important reform for our Water Act, where there would be additional requirements as well and restrictions for the granting of mining concessions for mining purposes, for water use. And there's a lot of scrutiny as well coming in for transmissions and assignment of rights related to those water concession titles. So as you see, those are three main aspects. There's a fourth also important, social engagement. We have additional requirements for social impact assessments, an emphasis on indigenous consultation as well. So going back to what John was saying, there's a lot of new requirements, limits, restrictions within this constitutional reform and secondary legislation reform. Now, setting a little bit aside the regulation and the statutory framework, I would go maybe just to three important aspects related to the reality of mining in Mexico. One is the administrative enforcement. In this past years, we have seen a more active administration, federal entities involved in mining project scrutiny and inspection visits. We're seeing an uptick in the cancellation and revocation processes of mining concession titles. So this is policy of this administration to see who is operating really mining projects in Mexico, who is not complying with their terms and obligations of their concession titles, and they're starting this inspection visits to different mining companies. To say a number, we had a couple of years ago about 22,000 concession titles. Right now, we are around 20,000. As I say, this past year's 2,000 concession titles have been revoked or canceled. So that's an important number. And one additional issue is the security, operational security. Of course, as John was mentioning, Mexico, I think it's not all over the region, the concern, but it is mostly where mining projects are being developed. And we have seen as well the constant presence of cartels, extortions, and other criminal acts that are affecting the development in certain regions of mining projects. Here, we would recommend always our clients to carry out from day one comprehensive risks assessment, risk management plans to establish all the necessary steps to identify such risks and to keep moving forward with your projects. And finally, one additional reality is something that Mo was mentioning is the dimensions, strategic planning related to critical minerals. Mexico is not the exception. Maybe many of you know, we have been in discussions mainly with the United States with regards to the critical mining strategies to integrate Mexican mining into the supply chain of North America, mostly with regards to energy transition, electromobility, and this is something that our administration is pursuing constantly in these past months. And here, my question is, I think Canada and Mexico, they should also, I hope that we see more engagement directly, bilaterally between Canada and Mexico. I know we have coming the review of our USMCA, but I'm seeing more activity in the dialogue between Mexico and the US rather than Canada and Mexico. And well, this is also a reality, what we're seeing right now in Mexico. And with that said, I think if business should be done in Mexico with regards to mining activity, we should consider the regulatory navigation. It's really important. Environmental compliance, water management, an effective community engagement, going into the details of the type of risks that we can identify. And with that in mind, I think there's also opportunities coming forward as well in Mexico.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emmy. I love it. I love it. We're going to work on that. I love it. We're going to move south to Ecuador. That was a great intro to this session for you, Edmond. We see positive movements in Ecuador, with noises towards the industry coming from the Noboa government elected in late 2025. And we know some really large-scale positive mining operations in Ecuador, but it's also been historically known as a difficult place to advance the industry. So Maria, Isabel, let us know the key things you see in 2025 and what you see in 26 and beyond.
Thank you, Mo, and thanks to all of you for being here. Well, in Ecuador, as Mo was saying, we had a re-election of our president, Daniel Noboa. He's a very young leader and he's pro-investment. He's a businessman, so he knows and he's aware that definitely our country needs mining to boost our economy. And when John was mentioning these bullet points in relation to the risk of doing business in Latin America, I think that was like an X-rate of most of the jurisdictions in Latin America. And I was really identifying what's happening in Ecuador with what you just mentioned, John. And I would like to just give you some ideas of what's going on in the recent months. Ecuador is still an emerging jurisdiction in mining. We only have a couple of large-scale mining projects in production, and a couple of other projects which are ongoing and receiving foreign investment. We've seen, although our mining cadastre has been closed, it's remaining closed since 2017, the government is executing and almost completing an agreement with a Canadian company for to perfect the system that will enable mining companies to be able to participate in a better granting process for mining concessions. So the government is expecting to complete that execution of the contract at the end of this year. So we have a lot of expectations in relation to these new systems that for sure will have a better way to manage the granting process of mining concessions. So a lot of good news in relation to the cadastre may be released at the end of this year. But in the meantime, we do have these ongoing projects that have had a couple of interesting movements in the country. We had an acquisition of the Cangrejos project last year by CIMOC, a Chinese company. Yesterday, there was an approval that was pending in relation to an acquisition of the 100% of shares of the Saúl Cascabel project by JCC, another Chinese company. So we've seen a couple of those movements in relation to ongoing projects for large-scale mining. But what is also interesting and worth mentioning is that the government has seen the importance of facilitating the development of the mining projects to investors. So they just launched at the end of last year a reform to the regulations to the mining law. And a couple of weeks ago, there was an approval of an urgent economic bill, including some interesting provisions to boost extractive and renewable energy sectors. In relation to the mining industry, what that economic and urgent bill of law was stating is that, first of all, in Ecuador, we used to have a very strict and constrained time for the exploration phases. So what the government just launched in this reform is that instead of having a very strict deadline in relation to initial exploration and advanced exploration and then moving forward to economic evaluation, the government included the possibility to continue exploration for up to now until maybe 15 years since the beginning of the granting process of the mining title, which gives the investors a little bit more of air for the exploration time. This is very, very interesting, because what we were hearing, investors were saying that having only 4 years in initial exploration, 4 years in advanced exploration, it was of course very strict and sometimes impossible to complete all those mining phases. So this is a really interesting improvement of the regulation nowadays. Also, the government merged both ministers, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. And that merge, that at the beginning seems to be a little odd, is giving a positive message also to investors for extractive industries, because one of the bottlenecks that Ecuador was going through was the granting process of environmental permits, as other jurisdictions in Latin America. So what the ministry is now facilitating is that investors, as the one authority is managing the extractive sector and also the environmental permitting phases, they are providing a more efficient process, and they are trying to grant environmental authorizations in less time to investors. So another thing that was incorporated in this law reform that I'm referring to is that instead of talking about an environmental license, they are changing the concept of environmental authorizations, and they are like kind of issuing a custom-made authorization for each phase of the mining process. So when you're in initial exploration, you wouldn't have to comply with all the requirements that you will need for advanced exploration. So they are facilitating the process in the granting of environmental permits. One thing that is also worth noticing with the reform is that we know that illegal mining is one of the biggest threats in Latin America for industrial mining and for responsible mining. Unfortunately, in Ecuador, this is the most powerful threat to the mining industry and to the security issues of the government. So in this reform, there are incorporated different paths in order to facilitate the combat to illegal mining. Now, ENAMI, the mining enterprises, it has big powers in order to being the only authorized entity to subscribe operation agreements with artisanal and small-scale miners, which gives the power of which gives the government more power and control over illegal activities. Nowadays, we've seen organized crime taking over some mining operations in some important and relevant areas of the country. So we believe that with this reform, for sure, we will have important control from the government in relation to illegal mining. One thing that's also very relevant is that like complying with the critical mineral strategies, the strategy that the U.S. is putting in Latin America, our country just executed an agreement to promote the development of critical mineral strategy in Ecuador. So our geological potential in Ecuador, it's very interesting. It's huge. We do have interest in deposits, and I believe that with this, the signature of this critical mineral agreement, for sure we will have interesting developments. And just to close, one important thing that it's worth considering about the reform in Ecuador is that they are changing the formula for the calculation of mining royalties, and it is more adapted to international practices. Also in Ecuador, we have something that it's relevant under our constitution. We have a government take that it allows to have the 50% share of the mining benefits to the company and 50% to the government. So now the reform is incorporating an important change in the calculation of the sovereign adjustment. That is really worth noticing, because when you're investing in a country, for sure you need to look at numbers, which is something really interesting, and the government is trying to improve that formula in order to provide more certainty to investors. One thing that sometimes it's better to mention the negative things in order to provide a better understanding of this. So in Ecuador, one thing that is now raising an alert to investors is that the government has launched what's called the mining fee, tasa minera. And what happened when the mining cadastre was open is that there was a lot of mining concessions opening for business and for granting process. So some companies retain several number of hectares in the mining concessions. So what the government tried to do is they were tried to avoid a speculation. So they didn't want companies or individuals to retain concessions to not do any activity in the mining sector. So they launched this mining fee or this tasa minera in order to avoid a speculation and to what is this tasa minera? It's a payment that investors should do in regard to the each mining hectare of the mining concession. And at the beginning, this sounded like a good idea. Also, the government promoted that this tasa minera was something that was going to be used to protect the security of the mining concessions. However, this fee, it's been a little bit, it's been higher than expected. So this is a really good concern for the investors. However, what the government has shown is that since this is not working in the way it should be, it's not attracting investors, it's doing the opposite. They have been very open in order to renegotiate the consideration for this tasa minera. So although we have this, now we believe that the government is open to change this fee, and instead of having this extortive fee, the government is more looking for a more reasonable fee for investors in the country.
Thank you, Isabel. That's a great overview. I'm sure there's going to be lots more to talk about at Ecuador after. It seems like there's a lot going on, and there's an interesting tension between things that the government is trying to do to streamline things and maybe things that are intended to create certainty, maybe are creating more uncertainty. So let's go south to Pablo, another jurisdiction that's seen some recent political change that's resulted in positive developments for the industry after what it'd be fair to call some turmoil and some tensions, some of the same tensions that might have affected Ecuador. So with our mutual client, we've seen a number of years of stagnant investment appetite all of a sudden explode with a lot of investor appetite in Bolivia's resources. So take us through, what are you seeing in 26 and beyond?
Perfect, thank you. Is the mic on? Yes. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Michael and Mo, for the invitation, and to Fasken. It's a privilege to be here. I've been into these events before, not in the panel, so I feel flattered to be here. Okay. Bolivia is perhaps one of the longest country with the longest mining tradition. We have a mine, the Mina Potosí, El Cerro Rico de Potosí, the Potosi mine, that has been mined for 400 years, and it's been under production, 400 years since the colony, actually. So we have a very long tradition when it comes to mining. What happened is that over the past 20 years, we've been led by left-wing governments that were not supportive to the private industry. They were basically advocating for state-owned companies to develop the natural resources, which includes oil and gas, lithium, and mining. So as a consequence of these, the Bolivian mining sector has been, let's say, in the shadow. However, 4 months ago, the country has managed to elect a new president, Mr. Rodrigo Paz. And Rodrigo Paz is advocating for a new country open towards foreign investors. We need foreign investment in Bolivia to solve some macroeconomic imbalances. And the results of these 4 months of his government have been very positive. He managed to take very strong decisions. For instance, eliminating the gasoline and diesel subsidies. We had subsidized, and that subsidy has been damaging the country and the macroeconomic of the country. And Rodrigo Paz, even though nobody thought that he could manage to eliminate that subsidy, he did it very strongly, but very positively. So this new government has announced several changes in terms of new policies. For instance, a tax reform that is right now under discussion at the Legislative Assembly. But they are also advocating for important changes in the lithium industry, in the lithium regulation, oil and gas regulation, and mining regulation. For all of you who don't know, Bolivia has the largest resources of lithium in the world. And those resources have not been developed yet. The country wanted to develop that under a state-owned company model. And so far, the country has invested $1 billion in those projects. And I'm really angry to say that we don't even produce salt for table salt. So that is changing. We will likely have new regulations in lithium, oil and gas in mining for the next semester. Something that is still pending and that we will have to see is whether President Paz has the power to navigate the Legislative Assembly to implement all these important changes. Okay, although, as I said before, eliminating the gasoline and diesel subsidy has been a very positive proof that he can manage all these situations. Okay, now as for mining. We all know that basically we have two kinds of projects in Bolivia: exploration projects and production projects. When it comes to exploration, there are, I think, 4 important factors that are playing positively for Bolivia. The first factor is that Bolivia has proven to have world-class deposits. There are 2 companies, pioneering companies, that have been exploring in the country. One of them is New Pacific Metals, with a huge discovery, and also our mutual client, which is Eloro Resources, with another huge discovery, high-grade discoveries, both of them. So one factor is that we have high-grade deposits when it comes to mining. The second factor is that we have this political change, this new political change that is open for foreign investors. The third factor is perhaps prices. We are seeing record-breaking prices in gold and silver that we haven't seen over the past decade, and this is playing in favor of Bolivia naturally. But the fourth factor, and this is very important, is perhaps the approach that the U.S. government has towards the Western Hemisphere, and particularly towards Latin America. We all saw what happened with Argentina when the U.S. government backed financially to the Argentinian government with $20 billion, and they were willing to support with another $20 billion as well. We all saw what's happening in Panama with their support and how things are changing in Panama towards Chinese investors. We also saw what happened in Venezuela, So the U.S. government is having a proactive approach towards Latin America that we haven't seen in the past. And as a consequence of this, just to mention something, President Rodrigo Paz has met with Marco Rubio for a couple of times, and he's meeting with President Trump next week in Mar-a-Lago for a president-to-president meeting. So it is important to know that this new approach that the U.S. has towards Latin America is definitely having an impact on what's happening and why is people starting to talk more and more about Bolivia right now. As for the legal sector, very quickly, we are, as a legal firm, we are expecting to have these important changes in these 3 highly significant regulations: lithium, oil and gas, and mining. And I don't want to get personal here, but I mean, I've been coming to the PDAC for a decade, and coming to the PDAC 10 years ago, it was 2 guys with a Bolivian flag talking about Bolivia, and nobody wants to hear about Bolivia. What Bolivia is, nobody wants to hear about that. A decade later, 10 years later, we managed to organize an event. It's a sold-out event. 150 people wants to hear about Bolivia. Perhaps this invitation is a proof that Bolivia is gaining momentum, and there's more expectation about what's happening in the country. Many things will have to change, but one thing that I can say for a fact is that Bolivian assets are very attractive right now, particularly in the capital markets in which we work together. Thank you.
Great intro to the panel and great intro for Bolivia to our audience. Thanks a lot, Pablo. So let's take our swing into some more established mining jurisdictions. We're going to go over to Claudio in Peru, where we have an election coming up. Let us know what you see in the future.
Well, thank you, Mo. Thank you, everybody, to be here. Political turmoil is our national sport. So we have had 8 presidents in the last 10 years, and we're electing a new one in April. So you can imagine that that changes a lot in the government, both views and leadership that need to be taking the decisions when you file for a permit. So it's been a challenging environment, but at the end of the day, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So Peru is blessed for its natural endowment. The recent Fraser Institute survey came out, and it was declared that 60% of the decisions are for geological potential, and 40% among other things on the regulatory framework. So at least we're doing 60% of it well. That said, it's not enough. And we and the government have taken up an approach to ease up and expedite the permits especially for exploration. Because without exploration, there's no discovery, and there's no pipeline of projects to get developed. No, it's been challenging. We are an archaeological country, so every time you pick up a stone, there is a ruin, and we need to protect that. So mining in Peru is not supposed to be easy. We have environmental laws. We need to correct historical errors that the mining industry has done to the country. And that explains most of the red tape that we face. We need to protect our archaeological heritage, and we need to protect the people working there. So that said, I believe it's very predictable and secure for a foreign investor to go to the country, and provided that they comply with, it needs to be complied, they would be in line to get the permits. It takes time, but we are improving. You can get a fast-track FTA for drilling in 6 months to 12 months, up to 20 platforms, and then scale up in the rest of the permits that you need if your project is successful. But you need to plan ahead. It's not supposed to be easy, and it's not easy in Peru. The Peruvian population, and we have a universe within the country. We have different people with different ideas, different cultures, and that's part of our richness. And we just need to be mindful of the challenges and that opportunities. So you need to be very strategic when you have both when you're acquiring and when you are filing for the permits, and if you are just claiming a stake in a mining concession from zero, to plan ahead and don't commit errors in the track to getting the permits. And that's where we, as a very successful mining country, because we are the second producers of silver in the world, we are the third producer of copper, and we have a long tradition of base metals production, iron ore, molybdenum, tin, and the rest of, and some other critical minerals. So the way you need to approach doing mining business in Peru is follow successful examples. The Canadians have been very successful in Peru, and we welcome them as investors. And you have been a great partner. We have welcomed and have benefited from Canadian mining investment with world-class mines that are currently in production and will be in production for the next 20 to 40 years. So they are the biggest foreign investor doing exploration work in Peru right now. And in our pipeline of projects, they are the second country of origin with over $9 billion of expected investment in the Peruvian mining industry. So we just ask other foreign countries and other national companies to follow the Canadian example and trust Peru and their leadership. So mining is really the backbone of the Peruvian society and economy. It's 9% of our gross domestic product is from mining. 65% of our exports come from mining. One direct employment creates 8 indirect employment in Peru. So we need mining to survive, to grow, and to eat. And the government has realized that in a lot of examples, because we have been in all the spectrum. We have committed the errors Bolivia has committed, and Venezuela has committed by expropriating the mines in the 1970s. The people of Peru and the government has realized that mining is not an easy endeavor. So you need to be very sophisticated and know your staff. And the government, let alone they can keep them in office, they will not be able to develop a mine with the standards that the current mining industry needs to be operating with. So I believe that I would hate to be wrong, but we have learned the lesson. And the lesson is we need mining to survive. We need mining to keep growing. And that without mining, what else? No, we are a very successful tourism industry, very good forestry and agribusiness, but they cannot compete with mining. So that's really understood, and the government, even though if leftists, they need to pay themselves. They need to pay the payroll, and they need to construct infrastructure, schools, roads, hospitals.
Claudia, I think that's a good place to leave it. I think we're going to go down just to leave a little time for the rest of our panelists too. I think it's a good place to leave it.
Of course.
So let's go down to Chile. Carlos, you want to let us know what you see?
First of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Myroslav, for the introduction. I am very pleased to be one more year here. I think I have been the 16 years in a row now, which is a long time. I'm going to talk about what's going on in Chile, and especially which are the big issues for the mining activities. In Chile, we had the election last December, and a new government will take place now in March 11 for a period of 4 years. We do not have re-elections. The new government belongs to the right-wing coalitions, and in general terms, the program contemplates, among others, the reduction of taxes from 27% to 24%. I hope it's going to happen that. The reduction of the size of the state, the control of the immigration, and improve the security of the country. As you may know, Chile and Canada have a very long relationship, mainly the mining activity. I would say that our relationship has more than 50 years as of today. On the other hand, Chile has a very open economy, and we receive investment from all over the world. And we do not have any restrictions at all in relation with the country that's making investment in Chile. As you all know, Chile is a mining country. Today, we're the largest producer of copper in the world. We're producing about 6 million tons of copper per year. In relation with the 4 big issues that I see in the mining activities, they are the following: production costs and communities, decrease in exploration, excess of permits, and lack of water in the north of Chile. In relation with the production costs, they went up very high in the last year. And my thoughts are they are going to remain high because the salaries, the oil, and the interest rate are still very high. Also, our mines are getting very old, and the grade of the minerals are getting lower and lower. In relation with the communities, in the past, the mining companies didn't have any relation at all with the community because it was not necessary at that time, and the communities didn't bother the mining company. Nowadays, mining companies have an intense relation with the communities because they are so powerful that they can delay for a long time the development of a mining project. And they can also stop a mining project saying that they are affecting their land, their water, their animals, and the forestry where they live. Today, it's extremely important for the mining company to negotiate agreement before the start of a mining project and keep those negotiations during all the life of the mine. In relation with the decrease in exploration, we have seen a big decrease in exploration, mainly for the difficulty of the mining company to raise money for those kind of activities. Notwithstanding the above, we have seen exploration mainly for copper and lithium in Chile. In lithium, the government of Chile is looking to find partners to sign several joint ventures in different areas where they have very good projects. In fact, the government have signed already many joint venture agreements with very large mining companies. Last year, they signed a couple of huge agreements with Rio Tinto company. In relation with the excess of permits, the issue here is the excess of permit in order to develop a mining project and the time required to get all of them. I would say that today the permits required in order to start a mining operation, there are about 4,000 permits, and the time required to get all of them is about 8 years. Finally, another big issue that we have is the lack of water in the north of Chile, where is our desert, and most of the mines are located in that area. Nowadays, the large companies are bringing the water from the ocean up to the mines, and in some cases they are located at 4,000 meters high. The big issue here is the cost of the desalination plant and the cost of pumping the water from the ocean up to the mountain. Recently appears an article saying that the mining companies are analyzing 11 new desalination plants with an investment of $9 billion to supply water to the different mining projects that we have in Chile. The main companies that are looking for this kind of investment are the large mining companies such as Codelco, Rio Tinto, Anglo American, and Antofagasta Minerals. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Carlos. We are going to try and keep this at 7 minutes each. Saúl, bright future for Argentina. Tell us all about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mo, people of Fasken, for this hard work, and all of you for joining us today. First of all, I have an announcement. I've been allowed to tell you here now that Argentina has decided not to win the World Cup this year. So Brazil, Canada, Mexico, the state, you are free to go. Try to do your best. We will not be on the way. Yeah. I will try to give you an idea about Argentina in 3 main aspects. Try to be very short: politics, economy, and mining. Just for you to understand the context of our activity. Regarding politics, the administration of President Milei is strong now because they won the midterm election back in October. They could add a large number of members to the lower house and the Senate, and they were able to send most of the reforms, the projects that they promised in their political campaign. Very important to mention, a change to the labor law that many previous administrations tried to do, and only Milei was successful, and will give more flexibility in the labor market that used to be very restricted and very expensive. Another very important legislation is a change of the glacier law that received the approval of the Senate on the Thursday. Still, the lower house has to prove that. But the important thing is that the previous legislation make no difference with regard to the areas considered in the periglacial zones, the permafrost areas. This legislation clarify that only those areas in the periglacial that really contribute to the hydro resources of the region are banned from mining, but not all of them. And the supervisory body who has the final decision are the provinces. It means that some of the projects that were worried whether they will have to reduce their areas, now they will be able to move forward with parts of their projects. This is very important. Of course, we know that there will be probably a challenge before the courts by the environmental organization, but this is a way in order to get final decisions on this issue. I have to say regarding the economic that Argentina came from a very difficult position in the economic situation, and little by little the administration was able to improve the fundamentals of the economy that looks pretty well now. from the very first moment, they went into surplus on the federal budget. It was a big cut on the expenditures from the government, and the people decided to support that even though they were suffering for less expenditures and less activity. But they still keeping the surplus. They were able to reduce inflation. You will be amazed here in these figures, from 20% a month to 2% a month. 2% a month, or 2 point something, is big if you consider on annual terms. But for us, it's a great accomplishment. And the last mile, it's difficult to walk through this last mile, but we are confident that we can do that. We can do that. Capital controls are being removed. Foreign exchange controls are being removed. We know it will take time, but the idea is that it will be possible to do business in Argentina as in any other country in the world. Regarding mining, I have to tell you that we are happy. We are very happy because the results in the mining sectors are very well, very good. We are developing the activity in a fast track. And last year, in 2025, the exports from mining increased 30% in comparison with the previous year, and we expect it will grow more. The reason? Well, the recovery of the lithium price. Nowadays, around 20,000 per lithium carbonate ton, used to be at 8,000, 9,000, and the production is there. We already have 6 projects in production, and there are 5 others in construction. And due to this increased price, there are many in the pipeline that start moving again. So whatever could be the interest of your clients, of yourself, you will find different opportunities because there are needs for financing, joint venture, acquisition, offtake. There are many opportunities on the pipeline of the different projects. Who knows if Argentina will be second, third, fourth producing in the world? It doesn't matter, but the production is already there, and we believe that the different chains of adding value to this chain will come. The other rising star is copper. We produce a little bit of copper in the project in the north part of Argentina, my hometown, but Chile produces enormous amounts of copper, and we believe that we should have the same resources in our side of the mountains. There are 5 world-class projects being developed at this time by the largest companies. The project Vicuña is José María and Filo, it's BHP and Landin. Glencore has Pachón and Mara, Albemarle has Altar. These are the largest. And when you consider figures, each of them involves something like 3, 5, 6, 7 billion investment. And all this was able to move thanks to a very nice piece of legislation that is a tax incentive regime that reduce taxes, remove withholding tax, grant all these permits a stability of 30 years. And the good news is that it was approved by a federal law, but also by the provinces. It means that the provinces has their own legislation banning the provincial administration to change the picture you take at the time these projects are approved. Income tax from 35 to 25, dividend payment tax from 7 to 3.5, no VAT payment. No VAT payment that otherwise added 21% more to all the expenditures. So there are nowadays something like 15 billion projects approved in mining, and they are required to make the investment in the initial 2 years between 20 to 40% of the total investment. So we expect massive investment in this area. The largest copper projects have not applied to or received approbation for this law yet. So we are happy. We expect a lot of activity again and again. In copper, there are a number of projects in the pipeline that may suit the profile of your clients, of your investor. So we are happy to say that good news come from Argentina. Thank you.
So perfect ending. I'm sold. I'm going to go invest right after the session. Roberta, thank you so patiently for so patiently waiting. Take us home to Brazil.
Thank you so much. First, thank all of you for being here so early in the morning and staying here with us until the end. So thank you all. As you know, as I'm a veteran, I'm a very optimistic person, and I think I have good news for Brazil. I will talk about 3 specific topics because I just want to share good news. The bad news, they are here in the newspapers. We still have elections to go on. We are not really greatly positioned for the World Cup, so we have bad news all around. But I'll focus on these 3 topics that I think can be interesting for you. First, we have, I think the government and Brazil as a whole, we want to switch from a commodity country, a strong commodity country, to a strategic partner in terms of strategic minerals. And this comes with some changes in regulation, important changes. We have a policy we came here last March. In April, we had the issuance of the new policy for strategic minerals. And this is actually to incentivize not only the extraction, but that we come producing and processing the minerals inside. And this attracts different types of investment, not from mining companies only, but for all the infrastructure that is around that. And this is really important for our country that still lacks a lot of basic infrastructure all around. So lots of logistics investments, energy, transmission lines, ports, railways. So there is a whole landscape of new investments that are called to come in from different parts of the world. So we don't have restrictions in terms of foreign investment. So this is good news too. We are allowed to receive whatever investor is willing to put money there. And jointly with this, it comes the actual incentives for this new investment. So we want to have the processing facilities, but we need to facilitate for those that are coming in with a very high capex, right? So there are several incentives in terms of the federal level. We had the players that needs to acquire machines and equipments. They will have the possibility to use the cost of those equipments, 50% of those costs in the very early years of their operations. So in terms of cash flow, this helps a lot. There is another thing that you have tax incentives also on the purchase of those machines that currently you don't have there. Sometimes you need to import them. And this is a reduction of about 10% when you have what we call PIS/COFINS, that is a federal tax that applies in these purchases, when you actually invest in the processing and smelting facilities. And then you have also the development bank with 5 billion more just focused on strategic investments to secure food supply, food security, and also technology investments in infrastructure. So, of course, this seems all good news, but when we actually implement, things happen and you need a lawyer. That's why I'm here and glad to talk to all of you. We had another very big change that we hope will incentivize investments that is related to permitting. We have a new law that has been enacted in November and it's just in place now. And you have 3 different categories of licensing. And in one of them, for medium or low impact, you have the self-permitting. So you declare yourself permitted, and then the government and the authorities, they can come and investigate and see whatever is compliant or not. But this do not apply to mining, but it applies to things that are around mining. For example, small parts of transmission lines, and these things sometimes they hold the whole investment when you have a full and very bureaucratical permitting procedure around the mining. You have also the extraordinary licensing process, where you have the federal government deciding what are the actual priorities and strategic investments that need to be easily permitted. And then you will have a totally different path for that. We are calling a fast track, but it doesn't mean that it will be less, that will be made not in a very strict way. You just have the authorities focused on permitting this specific investment. Again, this law has just been enacted. And of course, we have tons of NGOs coming into the Superior Court saying that it cannot be this way, that this will jeopardize the environment and the communities. But at least, and this is the message that I want to give to you, I think we are in the right direction. We are in the direction of making things easier, welcoming new investments, and try to add value to our production chain. So to actually have investments in the processing of what we extract in Brazil, with the right incentives to that, with at least a path. The path is not clear yet because we need time for the path to be clear, but I think it's good news, and maybe we can win the World Cup now that Argentina is not there anymore. So, thanks a lot.
That's great. Thank you. That's a great way to wrap up. Guys, how about a quick hand for our panelists? That ends the formal session that we have here planned today. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We do have a little bit of time for questions from the audience. We don't have anything in the chat yet, but is there anyone who wants to post something to the panel? Yeah.
A couple of you mentioned security risks, and particularly Mexico. With the recent event with Vizsla, it's brought to a head a sort of dilemma that some of the mining companies have. And Trump has named the cartels now as terrorist organizations. How do you see that changes the legal risk of suits or whatever actions being brought by the US government against boards, management, and all the rest of it? And how's that going to impact the relationships with the cartels? You can't ignore them. I won't say you can't avoid them. You can't ignore them. So I'd like to hear your comments about that.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good question. And actually, that's giving our compliance partners a lot of work on the preventive legal advice with regards, obviously, with ticketing this as terrorism and the activities that are being carried out by mining activities, that they indirectly have to do some payments for the transportation, for the use of highways. Obviously, that's a big risk that, and it's not a joke, that we're having more and more consultations on how to prevent or mitigate, to expose our clients to the risks of giving money to those, or to be understand that they are giving money to operate to those cartels, since they are considered as terrorist groups. So yeah, and it's just structuring and analyzing in the best way possible how you give resources for the development of your activities, of your operation, with preventive guidance of our compliance partner. We're on that, we're working on that, and I would like to give more details, but that's the reality of what we're doing right now. I don't know, John, if you have some,
just reinforcing what I said, most cartels know they can't extort directly the foreign mining companies, so they work with the supply chain that feeds them. But that, under these new designation, puts you at risk. If you're doing business with a business that's owned by a cartel. So I think the companies are working hard to protect themselves, and the cartels are working hard to paper these companies in a way that that there isn't a direct link. So it's the thing to understand about the cartels is they don't want you to go out of business. They don't make any money if you don't make money. And so that's that's a difficult thing to talk about in a room full of lawyers from around the world, but that's the operating reality. So I want to just very quickly say that one of the reasons people come back to this panel is that these lawyers are very brave in how they expose both the opportunities and the risks in their country, and I think that. That's incredibly important, but it's also important to understand that all the risks that we mentioned today are all mitigatable. And your industry is the most risk-tolerant industry in the world. You guys are problem solvers. And when the price of resources are as high as they are, all of these problems can be resolved. And so, the other thing that's really exciting in Latin America, for years we talked about the growth of left-wing populists in Latin America, and that was really a result of COVID. COVID was an exogenous hit on the region, and the reaction was strict quarantines, and it crushed the middle class, it crushed the underclass in Latin America, and that's what spawned, in 2023, we had 7 leftist populists running the 7 largest countries in Latin America. But amazingly, their institutions held up. And now we're seeing voters turning to something much more pragmatic, something much more centrist, something much more technocratic, and we're seeing government after government being elected that is embracing business. So right now, what you see is, despite all the problems, you have governments in place or coming into power that want to resolve those problems, that want to be open for business. You have the money to pay for it, and you have the experts to make it happen. And I'm seeing an energy here at Fasken, an interest in Latin America that at a level that I haven't seen in 8 years. And that's very exciting.
Thank you for the question. I think we got another question in the audience.
Hi. This question is for our Bolivian colleague. You touched briefly on Venezuela. And, my name is Ramon Andrade. I practice mining and energy law in Venezuela. We're seeing a tremendous amount of reform now on the ground. We have a new hydrocarbons law that it's investor friendly, even, comparable to the 2022 law that made Venezuela a energy powerhouse. We have a proposed mining law draft being discussed in the National Assembly, and the market is responding to that with a mining company just raising a few days ago 75 million, a raise that was hugely oversubscribed. Do you see any parallels on what's going on in Venezuela to what happened in Bolivia, or the sanctions still dominate the conversation?
We had these conversations before working in mining. I worked for an oil and gas company for 10 years. And something that we admire from Venezuelans is how capable they were to put in place a quick reform in oil and gas. And that's something, and certainly that's something in Bolivia we'd like to mimic. That's something definitely that we like to do. We've been discussing about oil and gas reforms in Bolivia for a long time, and we were not able to put them in place as they should be. So for sure, the capacity that the Venezuelan government shown to put in place this great reform in a record time is something that we would like to mimic. Another thing that Bolivia wishes to do is to implement the Argentinian regime, the RIGI. The country has actually, it was implemented on a supreme decree, but it had to be passed by law. So the government had to pull down that. But would like to implement the same regime for investments that basically provides legal certainty, international arbitration, and freezes taxes. So Going back to your question and to your words, the steps that Venezuela is taking towards these reforms is something that Bolivia will probably do the same.
Thanks, Pablo. Anyone else in the audience? No? I don't have anything in the chat, so I think this is a good time to wrap up. So that brings our program today to an end. I'm confident everyone who's here today and online will be walking away with a better understanding of the issues facing the Latin American countries represented here today and the region generally. And hopefully how Canada and Canadian companies can continue to play a role in Latin America. I want to express my deep gratitude on behalf of Fasken to each of our panelists for taking the time during a very busy week, and this year during the early morning, no less, to join us and put this together for all our attendees. And we hope that the future brings more opportunities for us to work together. And thank you to everyone in attendance, the participants, attendees, and of course the organizing staff without whom this wouldn't run. And Michael, the architect, shout out to you. Thank you for everything, for continuing to make this regional update a success. So everyone is welcome to stay with us here now for coffee or head off to your next activity. And our next event is at 12 o'clock, which is a panel on Ukraine called The Epicenter of Global Change. So if you can join us, we'd love to have you again. Thanks.